Luna, can you scrub my back for me? When the man's voice came from the other end of the video call, I was in a foreign hotel, signing IPO documents. Her expression changed instantly. She hurried to explain. Honey, don't misunderstand. Frederick drank too much. I was just helping him get home. I didn't question her. I didn't lose my temper. I simply glanced at the screen. This is a critical period for the two companies' merger and listing. I reminded her calmly. Don't cause anything that could affect the plan. She opened her mouth, still trying to say something. I had already hung up. 2 years into a strategic marriage, I never made decisions based on emotion. Since someone had crossed the line, then after the listing was finished, we would settle everything together. Chapter 01. It was 2 in the morning. The rain abroad was falling thick and fast. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of the hotel suite, the city lights were smeared into a blur by the rain. I sat at the desk, shirt sleeves rolled up to my forearms. Spread out before me was a stack of freshly printed documents, the final version of the new group's merger plan. This was my third all-nighter of the week. I spun the fountain pen once between my fingers, then set it back onto the page. I paused for a second at the signature line, confirmed the numbers were correct, and signed, Alexia. This name determined the future of 2 publicly listed companies. My phone vibrated on the desk. A video call request. Caller ID, Luna. I glanced at the time, then reached out and accepted. The moment the screen lit up, my eyebrow twitched almost imperceptibly. The lighting on her side was warm, clearly not the living room at home. Luna was wearing a light-colored silk nightgown, one strap slightly askew. Her hair fell down her back, freshly washed, still carrying a hint of moisture. When she saw me, she froze for a moment, then forced a smile. Hey, honey, you're still awake? I didn't respond. I propped the phone against the desk and lowered my head, continuing to flip through the documents. I gave a brief reply. Luna was my wife in name only. 2 years ago, under arrangements made by both families, we got married, a strategic alliance. No live-streamed wedding, no overwhelming media coverage, just a prenuptial agreement with clear clauses and cold, precise wording. She came from a good background, was beautiful, and had an outgoing personality. To the outside world, she was Mrs. Alexia. To me, she was more like a resource placed in a fixed position. At least, that was how it was on my end. On the screen, she seemed a little uneasy and lifted a hand to tidy her hair. Are you really busy over there? You don't look so well. It's always like this before an IPO. My tone was flat, without extra emotion. Just then, from the other end of the video, a man's voice suddenly sounded from off-screen. It wasn't loud, but it was clear enough. Luna, could you help me scrub my back? In that instant, the pen in my hand stopped. The nib hovered above the paper as a small blot of ink slowly spread. I raised my head and looked at the screen. Luna's face changed within a second. She snapped her head around, as if burned by something, then seemed to realize what was happening and hurriedly pulled the camera closer to herself. Why did you suddenly speak? The men didn't say anything else, probably realizing the situation, but the air had already shifted. I leaned back in my chair, my gaze calm. I neither questioned her nor interrupted. Luna turned back to me. Panic was obvious in her eyes. Even her breathing had gone unsteady. Honey, please don't misunderstand, she said quickly, as if afraid I would hang up. Frederick drank too much at a reception. I was just taking him home. Frederick. I was not unfamiliar with that name. Frederick, 32 years old, involved in gray area businesses between entertainment and investment. Smooth talker, wide connections. He was Luna's college classmate. Over the past 6 months, his name had appeared around me far more often than what could be called normal social interaction. I had never said anything, not because I didn't know, but because it hadn't been necessary. I looked at Luna without exposing her, without taking a stance. A few seconds of silence felt endlessly stretched for her. Her fingers unconsciously clenched the hem of her nightgown, knuckles turning pale. I finally spoke. My voice wasn't loud, but it was cold. This is a critical phase for the merger and listing of our 2 industries. She froze, then nodded instinctively. Don't let any scandals happen that could affect the plan. I paused, my gaze darkening. Otherwise, even heaven won't give you any face. I spoke slowly. She understood every word. Luna's eyes reddened instantly, and she shook her head in a panic. No, that won't happen. Honey, please listen to my explanation. She stepped closer, as if trying to approach the camera. I had no intention of listening anymore. I reached out and ended the call. The moment the screen went dark, only the sound of rain remained in the room. I lowered my head and looked at the ink dot left on the document by the pen. I wiped at it with a tissue, but it had already seeped into the paper. Forget it. I closed the folder, set it aside, and pulled out the next one. Emotion was the cheapest thing there was, especially in this era. Whether a strategic marriage or a real one, at its core it was cooperation. Cooperation had profits, and it also had a stop-loss line. If someone didn't follow the rules, then their value had to be reassessed. The rain outside continued to fall. I rotated the pen again and kept signing. In my mind, I had already begun calculating the remaining lifespan of this marriage. Chapter 02. After ending the video call, I didn't immediately return to work. Instead, I reorganized the documents once more, putting them back in order. It wasn't because my emotions had been affected, it was simply habit. The more critical the stage, the less I could allow any variable to slip out of control. Luna's video call only moved something that had already been sitting in my mental notes forward, marking it as needs handling. From the very beginning, marriage had never been the priority. 2 years ago, on the day Luna and I got married, I knew exactly what I was doing. My family needed her family's channels. Her family needed my family's capital. Both sides took what they needed. Marriage was merely the fastest and most stable form of binding. The wedding was low-key. There were no vows, no sentimental moments. She stood beside me in a custom-made wedding dress, smiling appropriately, like a carefully packaged commodity. I signed. She nodded. From that moment on, the nature of our relationship was written into a contract. For the first year after marriage, Luna was cooperative. She attended the events she was supposed to attend, said what needed to be said, and maintained the dignity expected of a wealthy wife. She didn't interfere in company matters, nor did she challenge my decisions. At least, on the surface, the change began when she started frequently attending gatherings of a private nature. At first, I only received a few reports of schedule conflicts. I returned to the country at short notice. She wasn't there. I needed her to accompany me to a dinner. She said she wasn't feeling well. All the reasons were reasonable, until one time, at a reception, I overheard someone casually mention Frederick's name. They said he had been doing quite well lately and was often seen together with Luna. I simply listened and didn't join the conversation. I had looked into Frederick. A questionable background, unstable projects, living off connections. When luck was good, he made a quick profit. When it wasn't, he disappeared for a while. Someone like that shouldn't have intersected with my life, and even less so with my wife's. I had my assistant compile a basic information summary but didn't dig deeper, because there was no need. Before the merger and listing, any unnecessary move was equivalent to handing ammunition to competitors. Luna wasn't smart, but she thought she was. She began testing my boundaries through small things. For example, asking whether I minded her participating in certain investments. For example, no longer avoiding me when answering calls at home. For example, deliberately downplaying her tone when mentioning Frederick. I gave no response, neither opposition nor support. That attitude, instead, unsettled her even more. She didn't know how much I knew, nor did she understand that what I expected from her had never been loyalty, but obedience. After that video call, her messages became more frequent. When my assistant transferred her call to me, I was in a meeting with the investment banking team. I signaled for the meeting to continue and answered, "Honey, I was too anxious yesterday and didn't explain things clearly." Her voice softened deliberately. "Frederick really is just a friend. Don't overthink it." I stood by the meeting room window, looking out at the street below. "This matter doesn't require repeated explanations." She fell silent for a moment. Then, "Are you angry?" "No," I said. "I was just reminding you." She seemed to let out a breath, then hurried to add, "I know you're under a lot of pressure lately. I won't cause you any trouble." She said it quickly, as if making a promise to herself. I said nothing more and ended the call. After the meeting, the head of the investment bank asked whether we needed to adjust part of the equity structure. I told him to proceed according to the original plan. Some people always think they're part of the game. In reality, they're merely temporarily allowed to stand at the edge of the table. I saw Luna's changes very clearly. She became increasingly anxious. She would send multiple messages if my replies were slow. She would suddenly ask whether, after the listing, we could relax a bit. She even brought up children. In an ordinary marriage, such words might count as normal concern, but coming from her, they only made me feel that she was grasping for a safety rope against some growing uncertainty. Her biggest miscalculation was believing that I would be led by emotion. It wasn't that I hadn't noticed how frequently she was in contact with Frederick. It wasn't that I hadn't seen the unusual flows in accounts under her name. I was simply waiting for the right moment, waiting until the new group was fully established, with all rights and responsibilities clearly defined, waiting until she had no bargaining chips left. The sky outside gradually brightened. I closed my laptop and picked up my coat. In this strategic marriage, I had never invested any emotion, so there was no such thing as disappointment. A true reckoning never comes at the height of emotion. It comes when all the rules are stacked most firmly in my favor. Chapter 03. After that video call, I stayed abroad for another 4 days. My schedule was packed from morning to night, barely leaving any gaps. Investment banks, auditors, and legal teams rotated in one after another. Everyone was focused on the same deadline, afraid that the slightest mistake might surface at the final stage. At a time like this, personal matters should have automatically stepped aside, but Luna clearly didn't think so. Her messages started coming more frequently. At first, they were just good mornings and good nights, with a few lines of concern in between, asking whether I was eating well, whether I was getting enough sleep. The tone was gentle, without extra probing, as if she were deliberately returning to the role of a normal wife. I saw them. I didn't reply. On the second day, she started calling. My assistant sent me the call log according to procedure. I glanced at it and didn't deal with it. By the third day, she changed her approach. That afternoon, I had just finished a meeting with the audit team when my phone vibrated. It was a voice message from her. The background was quiet, her voice deliberately lowered. Alexia, I know you're busy, but I'm really a bit worried about you. You're all alone abroad, and there's no one around to take care of you. The sentence stopped at a very delicate point. It didn't sound like blame, nor like coquettishness, more like a reminder of her own status. I replied with a single word, busy. A few minutes later, she sent another message. I don't have much going on lately. Do you want me to come over and stay with you for a while? When your listing is done, we can come back together. This was no longer concern. It was a test. I placed the phone face down on the desk and didn't reply right away. After the meeting ended, I responded, no need. When those words went out, I could already imagine the expression on her face when she saw them. Luna was used to my indulgence. In the 2 years since our marriage, I rarely refused her clearly stated requests, not because she was important, but because those requests were insignificant to me. Attending events, changing cars, buying property, arranging trips, all of that stayed within controllable limits. But this time was different. What she wanted to get close to wasn't me as a person, it was this specific moment in time. She wanted to confirm whether she was still inside the game. That night, she initiated a video call directly. I had just finished showering and changed into casual clothes. When I answered, I didn't adjust the angle. Her face appeared on the screen, makeup immaculate, clearly done with intention. You really won't let me go over? She asked straight out, smiling as she spoke. I won't affect your work. I sat on the sofa and set the towel aside. I don't need company. Her smile froze for a moment. Alexia, do you have a problem with me? She finally laid it out. If it's because of what happened last time, I've already explained it. I looked at her and didn't answer immediately. This kind of silence was pressure for her. I know you don't like those social engagements, but Frederick, Luna. I cut her off. She stopped. What you're saying now doesn't help anything. Her breathing visibly quickened. Then tell me, what should I do now? Her voice dropped lower. When you say nothing like this, I start overthinking. I stood up and walked to the window. Do what you're supposed to do. What am I supposed to do? She pressed. I turned around and looked at her on the screen. Don't cause trouble. The moment those words landed, her expression completely changed. It was as if something had been struck. Her eyes reddened instantly, though she forced herself not to let the tears fall. So in your eyes, I'm just a burden, is that it? I didn't answer that question. There was no need to. The video call ended abruptly. She didn't say goodbye, she hung up directly. After that, she went quiet for 2 days. On the third day, my assistant knocked on the door and handed me a file. President, this is what you asked us to organize earlier. I took it and opened it. It was a list of assets under Luna's name. Real estate, accounts, funds, several external investments, and a few fund flows that didn't look reasonable. One of them was connected to Frederick. The amount wasn't large, but the timing was precise. It coincided exactly with the period when she had started going out frequently. I closed the file without asking further questions. Keep investigating, I said. The assistant nodded and left. That evening, Luna contacted me again. This time, she didn't beat around the bush. Alexia, shouldn't we have a proper talk? Her tone sounded tired. I feel like you're deliberately distancing yourself from me. I stood at my desk, looking at the schedule pinned to the wall. Wait until I'm back in the country. She was clearly taken aback. When will you be back? After the listing is completed. She fell silent for a few seconds, as if calculating something. All right, she said. I'll wait for you. Chapter 04. As the IPO entered its final countdown, the atmosphere within the circle became noticeably more restless. Dinners and drinking parties under all kinds of pretexts followed one after another. Very few of them were actually useful. Most were people trying to climb connections during the narrow window period. I didn't show up to any of them. That didn't mean I didn't know what was happening. That evening, I was in the hotel reviewing the final round of clauses with the legal team when my assistant suddenly came in and placed my phone beside me. President, someone passed along a message. I didn't look up, continuing to read the documents. Say it. The assistant hesitated for a moment. It came from a drinking party. They said Frederick mentioned you, and what he said wasn't appropriate. The hand flipping the page paused briefly. What did he say? He said he's recently been able to access internal projects of the new group, and that you've already tacitly approved it, told others they don't need to take too many detours. When the words fell, The meeting room went quiet for a few seconds. The head of legal instinctively glanced at me, then quickly lowered his head again. I closed the file and placed the pen on the table. Which project is he involved in? The assistant replied immediately. There was a marginal entertainment-related investment before. It was on the observation list and hadn't entered the formal process yet. I nodded. Remove all of it. Starting now. The assistant froze. All of it? Yes. My tone was calm, including companies under his personal name and any indirect connections. Understood. The assistant left immediately to make the arrangements. The meeting continued. No one mentioned Frederick's name again. To me, this was merely a necessary risk cleanup. But clearly, to Frederick, it wasn't. The next evening, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. I glanced at the area code and answered. Boss Alexia. It's me, Frederick. His voice carried deliberately lowered familiarity. The background was noisy. He was obviously still out. What is it? I asked. It's nothing major. He laughed lightly. I just heard the group's been screening projects lately. I've got a few ideas and was wondering if I could find some time to talk with you in person. Who told you to contact me? I asked. There was a brief pause on the other end. Well, Luna mentioned before that you didn't mind me learning a bit more. The phrasing was clever. He brought Luna out to pad his own status. I didn't expose it. Project matters are handled by designated teams, I said. No private channels. His tone shifted immediately. President, there's no need to make it sound so distant. He laughed awkwardly. We're all on the same side. I leaned back in my chair and looked out the window. You and I are not. The line went silent for 2 seconds. Maybe I didn't express myself well. He quickly adjusted. I'm also thinking on Luna's behalf. After all, she's your wife. Some resources would be wasted otherwise. That crossed the line. Frederick. I called his name. He responded at once. You've been talking a bit too much at your drinking parties lately. His breathing stalled. Some things aren't for you to touch. I continued. And they're not something you should be considering on anyone's behalf. His composure finally cracked. Isn't that a bit too serious? I was just trying to help. Good intentions used in the wrong place become trouble, I said. From now on, don't mention me again. I hung up. No blocking, no warning. At this level, it was already enough for him. I thought the matter would end there. I underestimated his judgment. 2 days later, after my final internal coordination meeting before returning home, my assistant handed me a temporary supplementary list. These are observation candidates that a partner applied to add at the last minute. I scanned it and saw a familiar name. Frederick. He had changed the company name, changed the investment direction, packaged it cleanly, trying to circle in through another route. I placed the list back on the table. No need to look at this one anymore. The assistant nodded and immediately took it back. And one more thing, I added. Notify the relevant teams if similar situations come up in the future. Reject them directly. No need to report upward. The assistant acknowledged and left. After he was gone, I sat there for a while. Outside the window, the sky darkened, and city lights flickered on one by one. Frederick's moves were more rushed than I had expected. That kind of urgency often meant illusion. He thought he had already stepped onto the threshold, thought he was just one step away. What he didn't know was that the door had never been meant for him in the first place. Chapter 05. The night before returning home, I barely slept. Not because of nerves. There was simply too much to deal with. Every checkpoint required final confirmation. Emails, phone calls, meeting minutes came in one after another. I sat at the hotel desk until dawn, finishing the last review of the IPO process. This would be the first official appearance after the merger. Success was the only acceptable outcome. No deviation was allowed. At 6 in the morning, I closed my laptop and sent my assistant a message, asking him to arrange my schedule after I returned. Less than 10 minutes later, Luna's call came through. I glanced at it and didn't answer right away. The ringing stopped, then started again. I picked up on the third call. Are you already back? Her speech was fast, as if she'd been holding it in for a long time. I heard your flight lands today. Tonight, I said. She visibly relaxed. Then let's meet. She followed up immediately. At home. I've already had everything prepared. I neither agreed nor refused. We'll talk when I get there. There was a brief silence on the other end. Alexia. She called my name. Are you hiding something from me? I set the phone down on the desk and walked to the window. You're overthinking it. That answer didn't reassure her. On the eve of the IPO, to me it was just another stage marker. But to Luna, it felt like a door that could close at any moment. That evening, after landing, I didn't go straight home. I went to the group headquarters instead. The lights were on. The entire floor was mostly empty, with only the duty team still there. I sat in the conference room for a while and went through tomorrow's procedures one more time. My assistant knocked and came in. President, MS. Luna is waiting for you at home. I checked the time. Understood. When the car pulled into the familiar driveway, the house was brightly lit. Luna stood in the center of the living room, wearing a well-tailored dress. Her makeup was more refined than usual, clearly prepared with intention. Red wine and tableware were set out, but barely touched. When she saw me enter, she immediately stepped forward. "You're finally back." I handed my coat to the maid and nodded. "What is it?" She froze at the question, then smiled faintly. "We haven't had a proper meal together in a long time." She gestured toward the table. "The listing is tomorrow." "I thought at least tonight." "Say it directly." I cut her off. Her smile stiffened. The atmosphere tightened in an instant. She walked back to the sofa and sat down, fingers interlaced, knuckles tense. "Alexia, are you planning to restructure the group after the listing?" That question finally revealed its edge. "That's a board-level matter," I said, "but I'm your wife." She looked up at me. "I'm also a stakeholder in the group." I looked at her without responding immediately. "I've thought a lot lately," she continued, her tone growing more urgent. "We're husband and wife. Things shouldn't be divided this clearly. After the new group goes public, the outside world will definitely pay attention to our relationship. That's a plus for you too." She paused, watching my reaction. "I don't want to be excluded." The words were blunt. "When did you start feeling excluded?" I asked. She bit her lip. "You don't let me participate in anything," she said. "Projects, investments, even your schedule. I don't even know what you're thinking anymore." "That was never something you needed to know," I replied. Her emotions finally slipped out of control. "But we're married." She raised her voice. "You can't guard against me in everything." I walked over and sat opposite her, my tone still steady. "Marriage doesn't mean becoming one entity." She froze. "Before the listing, this is my final reminder to you," I said. "Don't bring personal emotions into matters of interest." She stared at me, eyes reddened, but no tears fell. "Is this a warning?" she asked. "It's a reminder," I corrected, "and it's a boundary." The living room fell silent. After a long while, she spoke softly. "What if I've already crossed the line?" I looked up at her. "Then you should bear the consequences." As the words landed, it was as if all the strength drained from her body. She finally realized that I wasn't talking to her about feelings. I was talking about rules. I stood up and didn't linger. "Get some rest," I said. "Tomorrow will be busy." I turned and went upstairs. Behind me, she didn't follow. The bell of the IPO was already close at hand, and some accounts were due to be settled. Chapter 06. On the day of the bell ringing, I stood backstage. The lights were bright, the process tight. Everyone moved according to the preset sequence. No accidents, no deviations. The new group was successfully listed. When the applause rose, I merely nodded and turned to leave. To the outside world, it was a moment worth celebrating. To me, it was simply one step in the plan. Back at the office, I instructed my assistant to clear all upcoming appointments. Only one item remained: meeting Luna. I chose a conference room near the company, neither home nor any private setting. She arrived early. When I pushed the door open, she was already seated inside, a glass of water untouched at her side. She hadn't dressed up much that day. Her makeup was light, and she looked visibly tired. When she saw me, she stood up and forced a faint smile. "The listing is over. Congratulations." I nodded and took the seat across from her. "Sit." She did as told, though her unease was obvious. The conference room door closed, shutting out all outside noise. "You asked to see me. What do you want to talk about?" She spoke first, her tone carefully steady. I placed the document folder on the table but didn't open it right away. "Before we talk," I said, looking at her, "I want to confirm one thing. Are you here today to solve the problem, or to keep explaining?" Her fingers tightened slightly. "Of course I want to solve it," she said, "as long as you're willing to listen." I nodded and slid the folder toward her. "Then take a look first." She hesitated, then reached out and opened it. There was nothing complicated inside. Several transfer records, an explanation of investment transactions, and a few timeline comparisons. By the time she reached the second page, her expression had already changed. "These, where did you get them?" she asked. "That's not important," I said. "What matters is whether you acknowledge them." Her breathing began to falter. "I can explain." She looked up immediately. "That money isn't what you think. I just lent it to Frederick temporarily. He was short on cash at the time." "Lent?" I asked. She nodded quickly. "Yes, lent." He said the project would return funds soon. I didn't expect it to drag on this long. I flipped to the last page and pushed it toward her. "Then what about this one?" Her gaze dropped, and her whole body stiffened. It was an undeclared related party transaction. The amount wasn't large, but the nature was unmistakable. She stayed silent for a long time. "I didn't mean to hide it from you," she finally said, her voice lower. "I just thought it wasn't a big deal. No need to make a mountain out of it." "Not a big deal," I repeated. She looked up at me, eyes reddened. "Alexia, we've been married for 2 years. Do you really have no feelings at all?" Her voice trembled. "I just made a small mistake, and you're pushing me to the opposite side." I leaned back in my chair and looked at her. "You didn't make a mistake," I said. "You placed a bet on someone else." Her face turned pale instantly. "I didn't." "You did." I cut her off. And you were betting that I wouldn't turn on you. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. The room fell silent. After a long while, she spoke softly. What if I'm willing to cut everything off cleanly? I didn't answer right away. I can stop seeing him, she said quickly. I can get the money back. I'll cooperate with everything you want. Too late, I said. Those 2 words broke her completely. Why? She stood up, her voice out of control. Did you ever give me a chance? You said nothing and just sentenced me to death. I stood as well, my tone still even. I did give you chances, I said. Warnings, boundaries, bottom lines, you crossed every one of them. She looked at me, panic appearing in her eyes for the first time. Then what do you want? I sat back down and placed another document on the table. This is a supplementary clause to the prenuptial agreement, I said. The activation conditions have been met. Her pupils contracted sharply. You want to divorce me? This is a termination of cooperation, I corrected. She collapsed back into the chair, as if all her strength had been drained. What if I don't sign? She asked quietly. Then we proceed with the worst-case scenario, I said. The outcome won't change, only the process will be uglier. She remained silent for a long time. Finally, tears fell. I didn't comfort her. I didn't hand her a tissue. Some moments are not meant to be interrupted. She lifted her head and looked at me, her voice hoarse. You took action against Frederick too, didn't you? I didn't deny it. Then what will happen to him? That's his problem, I said. It has nothing to do with you. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Fine, she said. I'll sign. I pushed the pen toward her. Her hand trembled as she held it, but she signed quickly. The moment the signature fell, there was no longer any room between us to turn back. I collected the documents and stood up. Someone will follow up with you on the next steps. She didn't speak again. When I reached the door, I paused. Luna, I said without turning back. From the beginning, this relationship was never meant for taking risks. She didn't respond. The door closed behind me. Some accounts had already been laid bare. What remained was only a matter of time. Chapter 07. On the 3rd day after the agreement took effect, the group completed the first round of internal adjustments. The moves weren't large, but they were precise. Several advisory titles that had originally been attached to Luna's name were uniformly removed. The reason was simple: organizational restructuring and overlapping responsibilities. The procedures were compliant. The documentation was complete. There was nothing that could be challenged. She didn't hear about it from anyone else. She realized it herself the moment her system access was revoked. That afternoon, she called me. I was reconciling accounts with the finance team. When I saw the incoming call, I didn't avoid it. I answered right in front of several people. Why didn't anyone tell me in advance? Her voice was deliberately low, but the panic still leaked through. This is standard procedure, I said, but I've always been involved in these matters. She pressed anxiously. Now everything's suddenly cancelled. What will people outside think of me? You no longer need to be seen, I replied, and you no longer represent any side. There was a few seconds of silence on her end. Alexia, you're forcing me, she said. I closed the file in my hands. I'm executing the agreement. Her breathing caught. Only then did she truly realize that once she had signed her name in that conference room, many things had already become irreversible. After hanging up, the head of finance glanced at me tentatively. President, should we slow down Luna's allocation plan a bit? No need, I said. Follow the clauses. He nodded and didn't ask again. At the capital level, matters like this never involved emotion, only sequence. What Luna received wasn't little. It was just far below what she had originally expected. She had assumed that after the listing, she would at least retain some voice. Only now did she realize that what she could take with her was limited strictly to what had been written into the agreement. That evening, she came to the group headquarters. No appointment, she went straight to the front desk. My assistant called to ask for my instructions. I told them to let her up. When she entered my office, she was already in bad shape. Her makeup was smeared, her eyes red. She had clearly been crying. You really won't leave me any room at all. She stood in front of my desk, her voice tight. I gestured for her to sit. This is what you signed. She didn't sit. I thought you were just trying to scare me. She stared at me. I didn't think you'd go this far. You misunderstood, I said. I've never relied on scare tactics. Her shoulders trembled slightly. Then what about Frederick? She suddenly asked. Have you already pushed him into a dead end too? I looked up at her. You're still worrying about him? That sentence was like the final thread snapping. Her emotions completely spiraled out of control. If you hadn't pushed me like this, how would I have? She stopped herself halfway through. She realized that continuing would only make things uglier. I didn't respond. A few seconds later, she turned and left. The sound of the door closing was heavy. Early the next morning, news of Frederick's downfall reached me. The project he had staked everything on had suffered a funding collapse. Several investment firms that had originally promised to come in all pulled out at the last moment. The reasons were identical. Risk assessment failed. This was market behavior. and also the result of a few early signals I had people send out in advance. Around noon, just after I finished a meeting, my assistant informed me that Frederick was downstairs. He insists on seeing you, the assistant added. His emotions are unstable. I glanced at the time. Let him up. A few minutes later, Frederick was brought into my office. He looked nothing like he had sounded on the phone before. His clothes were wrinkled, dark circles heavy under his eyes. He looked like he hadn't slept for days. President. He spoke the moment he walked in. His tone noticeably lowered. Is there some misunderstanding between us? I gestured for the assistant to leave and close the door. What misunderstanding do you think there is? I asked. He rubbed his hands together. The project, those investors all withdrew at the same time. No matter how I think about it, the only person I can link this to is you. You're overestimating yourself, I said. The market doesn't change its judgment because of one person. His expression darkened. But everything was going smoothly before. That was before, I said. Now it's no longer suitable. He stared at me, urgency clear in his eyes. Is it because of Luna? He asked. If it is, I can explain. You don't need to explain. I cut him off. What you should be doing is cutting your losses. He froze. What do you mean? It means you're already out, I said. Not just from this project. His face slowly drained of color. There's no need for things to go this far between us, is there? His voice tightened. I never intended to go against you. Whether you intended to or not is irrelevant, I said. What matters is that you crossed a line. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. You used connections you shouldn't have used, I continued. You spread talk you had no right to spread. This outcome is normal. He could no longer sit still. Then what about Luna? He suddenly looked up. She gets away completely unscathed. I looked at him. Her account, I said, has already been settled. That sentence silenced him entirely. He sat there, as if something had finally clicked. After a long while, he stood up. I understand, he said. I shouldn't have assumed so much. I didn't walk him out. When he reached the door, he paused briefly, but didn't turn back. The door closed. The office fell quiet again. By the end of the day, my assistant placed the final confirmation document on my desk. I signed it, then looked out the window. Everything was moving along its predetermined track. No unnecessary ripples, and no emotional epilogue was required. Chapter 08. The divorce procedures were completed on a weekday morning. There were no disputes, no delays. Both lawyers had already gone over the terms in advance. The clerk at the counter only needed to verify the information, stamp the documents, and file them away. The process was fast, like completing an ordinary administrative task. Luna didn't say a word the entire time. She was dressed simply, a black coat, her hair tied back casually. Her complexion was paler than before. When it came time to sign, her hand paused for a moment, but she quickly put pen to paper and didn't look at me again. When everything was done, she stood up and left first. Her back looked much thinner than I remembered. I didn't follow. I didn't see her off. When I walked out of the building, the sunlight was just right. People hurried past the steps below, each busy with their own lives. No one noticed that a marriage had just ended here. To the outside world, it wasn't an event worth paying attention to. To me, it was simply a complete settlement of a relationship. Back at the group, a new round of meetings was already scheduled. The post-merger organizational structure had officially stabilized, and each business line began operating independently. I sat at the head of the table, listening to progress reports from each department. Issues were raised one by one, then resolved one by one. No one mentioned Luna again. Her name was naturally erased from the system. That was the most realistic outcome. After the meeting, I returned to my office. The desk had been reorganized, clean and efficient. The family photo that used to sit off to one side was gone. My assistant didn't ask questions, just made the adjustment as a matter of routine. I reviewed my schedule. 2 major negotiations next month, 1 overseas acquisition, and a midterm internal audit report. Life was quickly filled with a new rhythm. Luna contacted me once afterward, not in person, through her lawyer, asking whether certain detailed clauses could still be renegotiated. I had my lawyer reply according to the agreement. There was no additional room. A few days later, there were no further messages. As for Frederick, I never saw him again. Occasionally, I heard fragmented updates through partners, saying he was dealing with asset disposals and wasn't in great shape. But all of that was already irrelevant to me. I had no interest in where he ended up. He never should have appeared in my life in the first place. At dusk, I stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows of my office, watching the city gradually darken. The lights came on, and the new group's logo was clearly visible atop the building across the way. This was the territory I had built with my own hands. Every checkpoint had landed exactly as I had planned. My phone chimed once, a confirmation message from my assistant saying tomorrow's meeting materials were fully prepared. I replied with a single word, okay. Traffic continued flowing outside, like a line that never stopped moving. I knew very well that I had never been someone who made decisions based on emotion. The end of a strategic marriage didn't mean failure. It simply meant the completion of a phase. If a person wants to go far, they can't keep exhausting themselves in relationships that have already lost their validity.